Imagine students coming into class already knowing the material. Instead of you teaching the same lesson over and over all day, you get to work with students while they're practicing using the new skills. This means you can instantly correct any misperceptions they have, and you're available to them for immediate questioning should they need it. This is a flipped classroom. On the Flipped Learning Network's website, the governing board and key leaders of the FLN have composed a formal definition of flipped learning. These FLN leaders also distinguish between a flipped classroom and flipped learning, which are not the same. Flipping a class can, but does not necessarily lead to flipped learning. Many teachers may already flip their classes by having students read text outside of class, watch supplemental videos, or solve additional problems, but to engage in flipped learning, teachers must incorporate the following 4 pillars into their practice. F. Flexible environment. Educators physically rearrange their room to create flexible spaces in which students choose when and where they learn. Furthermore, educators who flip their classes are flexible in their expectations of student timelines for learning and their assessments of student learning. They provide students with different ways to learn content and demonstrate mastery. L. Learning culture. Instead of having the teacher as the primary source of information, the flipped learning model shifts instruction to a learner-centered approach, where in-class time is dedicated to exploring topics in greater depth and creating rich learning opportunities. The teacher's job becomes to scaffold activities, provide feedback, and differentiate for all students. I. Intentional content. Educators think about how they can help students develop conceptual understanding as well as procedural fluency. They determine what they need to teach and what material students should explore on their own. P. Professional educator. The educator's role is even more demanding in a flipped classroom, although their role is less visible. During class time, they continually observe their students, providing them with feedback relevant in the moment and assessing their work. They are reflective in their practice, connect with each other to improve their instruction, and tolerate controlled chaos in their classrooms. They are available to all students for individual, small group, and class feedback in real time as needed. They conduct ongoing formative assessments through observation and recording data to inform future instruction.
The first thing most educators are going to ask is why flip? Well, here are a couple reasons to consider. With a flipped classroom, the content becomes available to students beyond typical classroom time. Students are now able to access the content anytime. Benefit that comes with viewing content in video format is the ability to stop, pause, play, etc. Students can write down questions about the content at home. Then, when students enter the classroom, they are already prepared to ask these questions to their teacher. When a teacher flips a classroom, that teacher is able to walk around the room. Ultimately, flipping a classroom frees up time for teachers to work with students individually. Now, let's take a quick break to think about how our students are used to acquiring knowledge. Students of today mostly learn from their phones and computers. Students of today are comfortable with the flip model because it's how they usually access knowledge. Lastly, we know some students learn faster than others. Flipping a classroom allows teachers to personalize.
Now I wanted to talk about PBLs because PBLs and the flipped classroom go together really, really well together. Now a PBL can stand for 2 things. It can stand for project-based learning, or it can stand for problem-based learning. Now, people write entire books and host seminars and do all sorts of things for PBL. I'm going to knock it over in 2 minutes. So if you like the sound of it, you've got to go and find out some other stuff elsewhere because there's just not enough time to cover everything to know about PBLs. But 2 ways that I use PBLs in my own teaching I can talk about. So once I've made a video and my students have watched that video at home, they can then come into class and start working on a project. Now in my ICT class or my digital technology class, that might look like coming into class and programming a Lego robot to make its way through a maze. Or it might look like taking a piece of software and creating like a computer game using Scratch 2.0 is a really cool one. So in terms of digital technology, almost all of the stuff I do in my classroom is project-based learning. They're given a project and then they're taught little steps at home via flipped learning, and then they can add to their project. They can add to their robot that does cool stuff. They can add to their computer game. They can add a score counter. They can add this. They can add that. So that's how I do PBLs in my digital technology class. Now, I do problem-based learning less, but I do it occasionally in my maths classes. Now, this is where I'll show them, I'll give them a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of direct instruction in the videos at home, and then I might ask them quite an open-ended question that they can start working on. Here's an example of the sort of open-ended problem that I might give to my Year 9 students who are covering area and volume. This question, how many golf balls fit in a school bus? Now, that's probably not like a lot of maths questions that you've seen in the past. There's no numbers there. They've got to go away, they've got to figure stuff out, and they've got to come up with a plausible answer for the question, how many golf balls fit in a school bus? And this is usually in a collaborative way, in small groups, working on the maths involved, area and volume, around this kind of question. Now, will PBLs work in your subject area? Now, there are probably ways to do it in all subject areas, but it's clearly going to work better in certain subjects. So if you want to combine the flipped classroom with PBLs, project-based learning or problem-based learning, have a think about how it works in your particular subject area and then go from there. Okay, that's PBLs with the flipped classroom.
My web design students currently use the tool Code.org in the classroom. We review the notes, the packet if there is one, and then complete the lessons. If I had students do the Code.org lessons at home over the course of a week, they take about an hour to an hour and a half per lesson. I could then present them with a customer's requirements for a website, and they could spend class time using what they've learned to create a model website for the customer, while I walked around with suggestions in which the class could then grade for suitability based on the customer's requirements and the targets that they learned that week on Code.org. Students working on a research project might spend their home time watching short videos on how to research, the layout of a paper, or specific grammatical elements the teacher will be grading for. In class, they can work with their partner doing the research needed, compiling their notes, and actually creating their final project together. The teacher is then able to come around to answer questions, see if the students understand the information they were researching, or just to verify that they're on the right track for their project. They also have time to sit down with students that completely do not understand and reteach with personalized attention. According to Chung Kwan Lo and Kae-Foon Hugh in their 2017 study, A Critical Review of Flipped Classroom Challenges in K-12 Education, Possible Solutions and Recommendations for Future Research, two possible challenges include the increase in the teacher's workload and the lack of engagement in the out-of-class learning that some students demonstrate. To help ameliorate the increase in their workload, teachers can borrow materials, videos, readings, quizzes from other sources such as Khan Academy, TeacherTube, etc. to supplement their own creations. In addition, starting small can be helpful. A teacher doesn't have to flip the entire classroom at once. Starting with a lesson here or there is a great way to see what works and what doesn't before changing over completely. To increase student engagement with their out-of-class lessons, the teacher can make sure that students understand there will be a quiz on the material from the video before the content is available on demand in the archives. Another possibility would be live casting the lessons. This would allow the teacher a chance to see who is present, as well as to answer questions as they arise. According to Regina Waddell in her article, Flip Your Classroom in 6 Simple Steps, the first step is simply to pick the standard you're going to teach, just like planning for a normal lesson. Second, and again like normal, develop your assessment. You need to know what mastery of the standard looks like and how you want to assess to what extent students have achieved it. In a flipped classroom, this is usually a 2-part assessment. The first part is a super short and easy to grade assessment to determine what they've learned from the online content. The second part assesses student understanding of the standard at a deeper level. Next, think about how you teach this concept to your students face-to-face and find that similar instructional content on the web to replace your direct instruction.
There are many different sites that offer free or interactive lessons. If you have the time and desire, you could also create your own video lesson. Try to keep the online lesson to 7 minutes or less. Content that is longer often causes students to lose interest and focus. Flipping your classroom gives you and your students more time to work on activities that require higher order thinking skills in class. This also allows you to be there to answer questions and offer suggestions as needed, which leads to deeper learning. Choose a few short practice application activities for students to complete, some individual and some with a partner or group. Additionally, be sure to select a mix of activities designed to develop deeper understanding for students who demonstrate mastery on the first assessment, along with activities designed to build up to mastery for students who don't demonstrate mastery on the first assessment. In order to flip your English classroom, first define what you are teaching as Waddell recommended. You must know exactly what the students need to know or accomplish before, during, and after class. Movely.com suggests that you divide your curriculum into subtopics, which will be conveyed to the students via video. These should build or connect to the next lesson just like in a normal classroom. The lesson plan that you create needs to include pre-class, in-class, and assessment activities. Pre-class activities might include taking notes, creating questions for the teacher, contributing to a discussion forum, solving a puzzle, researching examples, summarizing what they learned, or taking a quiz. In class, activities need to apply the learning objectives you originally determined. You might have projects, debates, model design, group work, labs, etc. Because many students are not familiar with the flipped classroom model, it is probably a good idea to spend the first 10 minutes or so expanding on the content in the video to make sure all students are in the right frame of mind. Think of it as a catch-up. Make sure you continue formative and summative assessments throughout the unit. Without ongoing feedback, students will not make improvements in their learning for which you might hope. Also, gather feedback on what works about the new model and what students would change and implement it accordingly.
Thank you for listening to my presentation today. Please give me feedback and suggestions by either texting B. Nicholson 743 to 22333 or by visiting this site below. Have a wonderful day.